We begin our report with the first look at what Donald Trump's second administration may look like. President-elect has tapped Congresswoman Elise Stefanik for UN ambassador. Former Congressman Lee Zeldin has been picked to head the Environmental Protection Agency. CBS News has also learned Trump plans to name his former advisor Stephen Miller as his deputy chief of staff for policy. And Trump has selected Tom Homan to serve as his administration's border czar. Homan, a former acting director of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, had been an ardent supporter of Trump administration policies that led to thousands of migrant families being separated. He spoke to Fox News Monday morning about his new appointment.
I'm honored the president asked me to come back and help solve this national security crisis, so I'm looking forward to it. Every morning I get up. Every morning I'm pissed off about what this administration did to the most secure border in my lifetime. So I'm going to go back and do what I can to fix it.
Democrats in Congress are reacting to some of Trump's cabinet picks and trying to work out what it means for the policies they say they'll be fighting against on Capitol Hill over the next 4 years.
Well, look, I think the election results made clear this is going to be a very challenging time. Stephen Miller and Tom Homan were the architects of a lot of the first Trump administration horrific immigration policies. And so family separation, mass detentions, those kinds of things is what was promised and by the Trump administration, and I think what we're going to have to fight.
Members of the Democratic Party have yet to unify on what core issues led to their losses this election. Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi said in an interview with the New York Times, quote, "I do have a discomfort level with some of the Democrats right now who are saying, oh, we abandoned the working class. No, we didn't. That's who we are." It's a direct contradiction to what some of her colleagues are saying, including fellow California Congressman Ro Khanna, who says Democrats didn't emphasize the party's, quote, better economic story.
We did not have a compelling enough economic vision. The Democratic Party should have one simple mission, and that is to address the economic hardships and struggles of many Americans, not just working class Americans, a large slice of Americans who feel the American dream has slipped away for their families and their kids.
CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa joins me now. Thank you so much for being here this evening. First, what do Trump's cabinet picks so far tell you about the type of administration he wants to have?
Good to be with you. So far, President-elect Trump is picking loyalists to fill up some of the key roles inside his administration. He is also balancing those who are generationally young with his own generation and being in his upper 70s. He's picking young members of Congress, former members of Congress so far to staff up and run EPA, to be the U.S. voice for the country at the United Nations. And you see in Susie Wiles, someone who's a trusted advisor from the campaign. And Stephen Miller, he won't be needing Senate confirmation as Deputy Chief of Staff of the White House, but you can bet, based on my conversations with Trump associates, he will have enormous power working with Tom Homan and others on border policy.
Well, Miller, we know, is an immigration hardliner. He got some attention last month during that rally at Madison Square Garden in which he said America is for Americans and Americans only. Between Homan and Miller, both who have championed Trump's hardline immigration stances from his first administration, including the family separation policy, can we expect an equal or even more hardline stance in his second term?
There's a belief inside the Trump inner circle that President-elect Trump has a real mandate on border policy. When I spoke to President-elect Trump on Election Day, he said he's looking at the exit polls and he knows the economy is a driving issue for many voters, but he really believes, because, as he put it, he was strong on immigration. That was his characterization. That leaves him in a position, now that he's won over 300 electoral votes in the popular vote, to really move fast on these mass deportations. The question's going to be, for the Trump administration, what defines the word mass? Is it going to be 1 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million? Logistically, how is that possible? Financially, what's the buy-in from Congress about the scope of this policy? And you can expect a lot of conversations in the coming weeks about all of those matters.
On the Democratic side, what sort of conversations are happening behind the scenes regarding what went wrong this election and the next steps for the party working under a Trump administration?
Because Vice President Harris ran a compressed campaign, I'm not detecting in my reporting any anger toward her. There's some frustration among some Democrats with President Biden for the late exit out of the race. But many Biden allies would counter that, and they have to me privately, that they believe President Biden should have stayed in the race and might have beaten President-elect Trump. So The Democratic back and forth is going to continue for quite some time. The question is going to be, does Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic House leader from New York, can he start to really build towards 2026 and winning back the House?
Robert Costa, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For more on the potential changes to immigration policy under the Trump administration, let's turn to CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez. Camilo, so good to see you here in Studio 57 in New York. So Tom Homan appeared on 60 Minutes last month and was asked, there wasn't much of an outline, how the government would carry out the largest deportation in American history. He was asked how it would work. Here's some of what he said.
We have seen one estimate that says it would cost $88 billion to deport 1 million people a year.
I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Is that what American taxpayers should expect?
What price do you put on national security? Is that worth it?
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
Camilo, what are the challenges of a policy like this, both on a humanitarian, logistical, financial basis, all of it?
Well, Lindsay, this operation will certainly face significant and formidable legal, operational, and humanitarian challenges. On the operational and financial front, we know that Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the agency that would be primarily responsible for carrying out these mass deportations, only has about 6,000 deportation agents and about 41,000 detention beds. That is not nearly enough to detain, arrest, and deport everyone who is in this country illegally. The last estimate from the Department of Homeland Security puts that number at around 11 million people living in the country illegally. And obviously, when the vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, the vice president-elect, says that 1 million deportations would be carried out in a single year, it is really difficult to see that happening now, especially because Congress has not allocated enough funding for ICE to carry out that number of deportations. But obviously,
manpower to go and find people and to house them in detention.
That is correct. And this is really labor-intensive work. And it could be that the Republican Congress, and it does seem like the House is going in the GOP's favor, does fund this operation. But there are also humanitarian challenges. Right now, there are millions of children who are U.S. citizens who live with an undocumented parent, about 4 million, according to one study. The question is, Lindsay, what happens to the children who have legal status here or who have U.S. citizenship if their undocumented parents are targeted for deportation? Do they get deported together? The U.S. government does not have the legal authority to deport a U.S. citizen. Or do they get sent to another guardian? Do they stay here in the foster care system? These are humanitarian challenges that the second Trump administration will face. And we actually spoke to an immigration attorney in Tucson about the concern that right now many immigrants are feeling. Let's take a listen.
It's a harsh and cruel reality that us immigrants are going to have to face once January 20 comes along.
Why do you say that?
There's so many threats affecting our immigrant community. First of all, this massive deportation plan is going to incarcerate immigrant families. It's going to separate immigrant families. It's going to create fear.
And what advocates also tell me and immigration attorneys tell me, Lindsay, is that they are going to try to make the case in the court of public opinion that these mass deportations will be cruel, inhumane, and draconian. But obviously, as you know, we have seen polling indicating that more and more Americans are supporting restrictive immigration policies, including this pledge to carry out the largest deportation in American history.
Trump made it a point of every rally, and he won in a landslide. So a large number of people who could be deported under Trump's plans were allowed to enter the U.S. legally under 2 Biden programs. What happens to them?
That is an excellent question, because in addition to the 11 million undocumented immigrants estimated to be living in the U.S., most of them have been here for decades, if not more, in the country illegally. There are also hundreds of thousands of migrants who have recently arrived to the U.S. under Biden administration programs that were designed to alleviate pressure at the border, to give people who were intending to cross the border illegally a safe and legal alternative to doing that by coming to the U.S. legally. They are right now here on a temporary legal status that can be revoked unilaterally by the next administration. And President-elect Trump has promised as much, that he will terminate these programs, and now these immigrants will become part of the undocumented immigrant population. And if a judge decides that they are not eligible for asylum, they are subject to deportation. So the pool of people who could be deported could be much larger than the 11 million people who are currently here illegally.
Camilo, Montoya-Galvez, I'm sure we'll be talking to you in the days, weeks, months to come. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lindsay.